Good morning, everybody. You know, we're used to these stories. Oh, by the way, it's 10 o'clock. It's not 9 o'clock for those of you that have woken up late after a heavy night and are bewildered and confused. It is 10 o'clock. We are on British summer time. We're used to stories, aren't we, about Tory splits, particularly Tory splits on Europe. In fact, ever since the Maastricht Treaty, a quarter of a century ago, that's been one of the dominant themes in our papers. And, of course, the old saying that divided parties don't win elections is generally pretty much true. So we're always focused on these divisions. We very rarely focus on divisions that exist within the Labour Party, but I really think they're beginning to open up, and I want to talk about them. Why? Well, Owen Smith, Northern Ireland spokesman, but don't forget, the man that stood against Corbyn as leader and managed to get about a third of the vote, Owen Smith basically come out again and reiterated his call for there to be a second referendum on the result of whatever deal Mrs May comes back from Brussels with. And he's been very promptly sacked by Jeremy Corbyn, as indeed were three front benchers last year, you know, who voted on a resolution for us to stay in a single market. So at times, we see this hard man Corbyn. We see him putting down the argument there should be a second referendum, and I'm guessing he's doing it because he understands there are 4.5 million people who voted for Corbyn's Labour Party last June, who in the previous year had voted for Brexit. But there's also, I think, a slight inconsistency with the way in which Jeremy Corbyn is leading this party. Because Diane Abbott, the Shadow Home Secretary, long-term, of course, personal friend, and one of the closest confidants, I think, that Jeremy Corbyn has got. You know, and we see here, you know, her writing back to a constituent saying that she thinks, actually, the chance to have a second vote is right. She says, I will argue for the right of the electorate to vote on any deal that is finally agreed. So she doesn't use the word referendum, but she makes it absolutely clear that she's backing it. She hasn't been sacked, but Owen Smith has been sacked, and indeed others have been sacked. So they're split on Europe, but they've also got some real problems on the issue of anti-Semitism. And this keeps on coming back again and again and again. And the latest instalment is the mural, a street mural which showed, Jewish financiers sitting round the table plotting the future of the world. It was the old Jewish global conspiracy story there, writ large, for all to see, and it was about to be removed, and Corbyn said he didn't think that it should. He now says he regrets having made that statement and wished he'd looked at the picture more closely. But boy, you don't need to look at that picture for more than about half a second to see the message that it's giving. And some who feel that Labour has gone so heavily for the growing Muslim vote in this country that it's allowed voices within there who are seen to be anti-Semitic. And certainly, evidence that around the country, Labour Party meetings have been held where women sit on one side of the room and men sit on the other side of the room. Something I didn't think we'd see happening in modern Britain. So the question this morning, to begin with, is the Labour Party now seriously split? And for those of you who are seeing the front page of The Observer and other newspapers, I will, at 11 o'clock, talk about the Leave campaign, its relationship with Cambridge Analytica, my role in it, because my picky seems to appear in a few of the papers this morning, and we'll do that at 11 o'clock. I will ask you at 11 o'clock whether you think the Leave campaign cheated its way to victory. But for now, is the Labour Party seriously split? And if you agree with me that actually these splits are beginning to emerge and could become quite serious, then please call me on 0345 60 60 973. Or if you think, no, this is just ordinary day party politics, there are always differences of view and opinion, then you can text to 84850. Or maybe you think Labour needs a new leader or a shift in its direction, in which case tweet using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC. Watch me on Facebook and comment there too. I'm going to go to Dave, who's calling from Hammersmith. Dave, good morning.
Good morning, Nigel.
So is the Labour Party split in your view, Dave?
I don't think it is, but I think it should be. I think the problem we've got is that the MPs the Labour MPs, I mean all MPs to be honest, but particularly the Labour ones at the moment, they're self-serving. They don't have the courage of their convictions. They daren't split because they think, Corbyn might just win it. And I think that the Labour Party has been infiltrated by what appears to me to be a communist-type party. I mean, it's similar to what you've got going on in Cuba, where they infiltrate, they teach the young and, they start creating these youth groups and things like that. And you've only to look, actually, at Corbyn himself. So we saw him being incredibly unpatriotic with the whole Russian thing. We see him immediately...
Why was it, Dave, why was it unpatriotic to question whether the Prime Minister had evidence?
There's a time and there's a place, and that was a time when we needed to stand together against an enemy or a country that's acting like an enemy. I wouldn't say they are an enemy, they shouldn't be, but they are behaving like one. And when you've got a police officer, in hospital, he was in hospital, very seriously injured.
So you saw that, Dave, you saw that as a my country right or wrong moment, yeah?
I think at that particular moment, because it was the announcement by Theresa May, that to me...
All right,
was
okay, no, fine, you've made your point on that, Dave, you've made your point on that. All right, going on from there,
these politicians, these Labour politicians, they had a few goes at being elected, and they messed up. And so they've put Corbyn in, and they've all voted against him, haven't they? How many? 3 times is it now? And finally, he got in. He managed to beat those off. So they say, okay, well, we can't get rid of him. We'll ride with him. And yet, so many of them, through their history, were there with Blair, and really don't share the same political core. So they should have the courage of their convictions, form a new party, and let the communist Corbyn run his own communist party.
Right, so you would suggest, Dave, a new SDP? They've got to find a new Roy Jenkins and a fresh start.
Oh God, no! I think at the end of the day, I mean, I lived through that. That was awful.
Well, they did get a lot of votes, Dave.
Well, I think the problem they've got is how they are structured, about how they are elected, how their leaders are elected. The percentage of vote,
right.
the way they've reached all that. I think that's the bit that's not. It seems to me to be a bit dodgy.
So, in short, Dave, they don't look really split, but they should be.
Well, they should be. They've created all spend £20 or spend £3 and you can vote.
I know.
And that's how they elected Corbyn.
Yep.
And then they put the price up to 30 quid.
Pretty effective. Quite good management. Actually, very capitalist of Corbyn to behave in that way. Dave, I thank you for your call. Sue says to me on text, get over yourself, Owen Smith. The Blairites are a thing of the past. Jeremy is here to stay. Sue, I think this gets to the heart of why I think they're split. The Parliamentary Party just about manages to hang together. They can see it's in their common interest not to be too divided too often in public. But there is a gulf between the Parliamentary Party, which is still essentially Blairite, and the Labour Party in the country, which has radically changed over the course of the last few years and is very much a Corbynite and very left-wing political party. And I think that split can only get bigger over time, because what's going to happen is momentum, and they've made it pretty clear, are going to start a process where they want to deselect what they see as soft centre Blairite. So I think these divisions are there. I think clearly the row over anti-Semitism is part of it. Absolutely, whether to have a second referendum is a part of it too. And my guess is that Corbyn is in control of that grassroots party, and he will not want a Labour Party to be voting for resolutions on a second referendum, because he knows that leaves him open and vulnerable, and millions of votes could be lost. Let me know whether you think I'm right or wrong by calling me on 0345 6060 973. Daniel is calling me from Barnet. Good morning, Daniel.
Good morning, Nigel. I just wanted to say that I think I do agree with you that Corbyn hasn't got the backing of the entire Labour Party or the entire country. I'm a student from North London, and I think that he's probably enthralled my generation to vote, but I think he's not focused enough on the older generations, and I think that's maybe where he's losing the backing of his party.
Well, certainly, Daniel. I think of areas like South Wales, the Midlands of England, the north of England, where, a lot of middle-aged and older people from lifelong Labour families went out and voted Brexit and did so with a real passion in their hearts. So he's in trouble with them, isn't he?
Yeah, most definitely. And I think what you said earlier...
Unless, Daniel, the sacking of Owen Smith shows you that he's going to resolutely make sure we get over the hurdle of March the 29th next year so that we do leave the Treaty of Rome.
I think what you said earlier really does ring true about Corbyn coming through as a smart man, sacking Owen Smith.
Yep.
And I think that if we see that more from Mr Corbyn, then there might be more confidence in him, because I feel like not enough people are taking him seriously. He's definitely got some policies there, and he's definitely got some understanding and some aspirations, but I think he needs to put himself through as a real politician and a real force to be reckoned with a bit more.
Yep, okay, well, and how do you rate Owen Smith as a public performer?
Not very highly.
No, I tell you what, he's got amazing self-confidence for somebody without too much experience of frontline politics. I was on Question Time with him the other week, and boy, this guy believes in himself and believes in his policies, and I will give him that. Daniel, I thank you for your call. And Owen Smith has really got form on this because, he said repeatedly there should be a second referendum. He's also basically said that Northern Ireland should remain part of the European Union. He thinks if Northern Ireland leaves, he says that will undo the Good Friday Agreement. It will undo the peace process. And he said that at meetings organised by Sinn Féin. I wonder, does Owen Smith actually want a united Ireland? Is that part of what he believes in too? I don't know. If you do, call me. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show. Before we return to the issue of just how badly split is the Labour Party as Jeremy Corbyn sacks Owen Smith for calling once again for a second referendum on the final deal, spare a thought this Sunday morning for France, where flags are flying at half-mast at gendarmeries right across the country, and I'm talking, of course, about the death of 44-year-old Lieutenant Colonel Arnaud Beltrame, a man who had graduated in the French military, served as a peacekeeper out in Iraq, and who did something truly extraordinary outside Carcassonne the other morning when an ISIS-inspired lone gunman had taken hostages, and he volunteered to put himself in return for one of the hostages being released. And in doing so, he kept his phone open so that people on the outside could track what was going on. And clearly he thought that as and when things kicked off at the end, that he'd be able to do something. And unfortunately, he was seriously wounded and he has died. And, the word hero gets thrown around. We talk about, footballers and people being heroes. And I don't think there are many real heroes these days, but this guy, for what he's done, is a hero, total hero. Greater love hath no man than he lays down his life for another. So spare a thought for Arnaud Beltrame. And also, just remember, there are still some amazing people out there in this world. Not everybody is bitter, cynical and horrible, and it's tragic that he finished up losing his life. Back to the Labour Party, back to infighting, back to rows over anti-Semitism, a Blairite party in the Commons, dragging Corbyn towards accepting some form of customs union membership post-Brexit. But it does look like Brexit, in terms of how people vote in Parliament, that Corbyn wants to stop the calls for a second referendum, unless, of course, those calls are made by Diane Abbott, and then, apparently, it's absolutely fine. So there are some inconsistencies there, too. Sally is calling from Kingston. Good morning, Sally.
Good morning, Nigel, and my sympathy goes to the family of Arnaud.
Absolutely.
Firstly. It's very, very tragic. Regarding what's happening in this country, and first of all, can I say something about the peace process? And the one reason that the peace process was very successful in Ireland was because of Twin Towers, because the Americans stopped sending money to the IRA. So I don't think they'll be sending money again to the IRA. I think that's one reason why the IRA would not have success in starting, problems again in Ireland. So that's the first thing. But secondly, as far as Jeremy Corbyn's concerned, I believe that the Labour Party was just trying to hoover up the votes from UKIP after the referendum, and it was tactics all along. I'm not even sure what they believe in. I mean, there's lots of individuals that believe different things, and it was just a question of getting into power. And that's the same situation I feel for this, I'm afraid, turning against Jewish people. There's more Muslims than there are Jewish, and they were just going for votes. So the whole thing's tactics. It's not belief. It's get into power. And
but ultimately, Sally, and I do rather agree with you, because the clever thing that Corbyn did in the general election last June, using his manifesto, he convinced former UKIP voters to return to Labour, whilst at the same time hoovering up an awful lot of Remain voters amongst the younger generation and in London and Bristol and elsewhere. But you can't go on riding both horses forever, can you? At some point, you have to come clean with where you really stand. And I'm beginning to get the feeling, Sally. I mean, he must be very frustrated because, his own parliamentary party is way more Europhile than he's ever been. He's an old Bennite, he opposed all the EU treaties over the years. But do you get the feeling that he's now put Diane Abbott accepted, that he is putting a red line down? He does not want Labour MPs now calling for a second referendum.
But I would go for a second referendum, because I think that the pressure from the Remain is causing a terrible deal. We're not going to get a good deal at all. No. And when you look at the deal we're going to get, I mean, it is just ridiculous. Personally, if we have another referendum, I'd like to see 3 questions. 1, shall we stay in the EU? 2, shall we stay under the terms they're giving us? And 3, shall we just go off a cliff edge? That's what I would like to see, because I think the British people are. I mean, the way this country.
But there's no appetite, Sally. Sally, there's no. I mean, this is the other interesting thing. Is there is no appetite for a second referendum. Yes, I know Lord Heseltine wants a second referendum, and I know Alistair Campbell wants it to be rerun, and so does Tony Blair and Nick Clegg, and others, and Ken Clarke, of course. But actually, if you look at the polling, Sally, it's really consistent. It's about 20% of people that want a second referendum. It's no more than that. And I just wonder whether Corbyn has now recognised that.
But do you not think that the whole of Britain is furious at the deal that we're getting? Do you not think that
Sally,
those Remainers are furious?
Let me tell you, maybe tomorrow, perhaps the day after, what I will do on my midweek evening show at 7 o'clock is we will dissect what Theresa May has agreed to in terms of our negotiations on a new free trade deal, and the further concessions that were made in Brussels on Friday morning. So I will go through that, and I get more and more frustrated with the watering down. I begin to think more and more it'll be Brexit in name only, Sally. But the big historic moment, I suppose, is leaving that treaty, provided that we do, on March 29th next year.
Well, good luck, that's all I can say, because I think you've got a huge battle to fight.
I don't think it's over by a long chalk, and I wasn't being complacent for one moment, and I still fear the attempt to put a second referendum upon us, but the public are not warming to it. Sally, I thank you very much indeed for your call. And Keir Starmer, who, is a very strongly Europhile shadow minister. Of course, Brexit is his responsibility. It's quite interesting that there's an interview with him in the Observer today where he says Article 50 was triggered a year ago. It expires in 52 weeks and a few days, and I don't think there is any realistic prospect of it being revoked. Therefore, we will be leaving the EU in March 2019. So that's what Starmer has said this morning, and quite clearly there, he's come down on the side of Jeremy Corbyn, not on the side of Owen Smith. Jim says, I can't make head nor tail of Labour's leave or remain policy. They were leave before the last election. Then Starmer said they are customs union remain. Perhaps someone should ask their Brexit spokesman Starmer what's their position. At present, it's like shifting sands. Jim, it is desperately confusing, but I do think maybe from the Labour leadership there's a little bit of clarity that they do actually think we have to get out on March the 29th next year, and then possibly almost replicate the form of membership we had before. And many would argue, well, you know, is that any better than where we are? But that, I think, is the position they're heading towards. What about the percentage of Labour voters who voted to leave? Wasn't it around about 40% or more? Surely the hierarchy should take note. Well, actually, it was about 30% of the 2015 Labour vote that voted Brexit. But don't forget, there was a big boost in Labour votes at the last election, and many of them were Brexiteers. My best guess, about 4.5 million Labour voters who'd voted Brexit, who voted Corbyn in 2017. Carol is calling from Uxbridge. Are they split, Carol? Am I right about this?
Yes, 100% they're split. They're
Right.
like 30 Basset Brigade.
Right. And what do you think the split... Is it Europe they're split over? Is it the Blairites versus the Corbynites? Where do you see the big divide?
Well, Corbyn is out for himself. 100%. He is a blatant racist. He's not fit for purpose.
He's a blatant racist,
they-
did you just say?
Yes.
Could you explain that to us?
All he's interested in is going to get the vote for himself. He doesn't care about the people of Great Britain. He cares for what his projected image.
But how do you see that, Carol? Carol, how do you see that as racist?
He doesn't care about the people of Great Britain. He's out for himself. And all he seems to care about is foreigners in this country, not the people, not what we stand for. They're not. Labour does not stand for the working class people anymore.
So, Carol, what you're saying is you believe Corbyn is racist towards the white working classes?
Yes.
In the sense that he looks down upon them?
He's arrogant enough to think that because he's got certain people behind him that use a racist card, he doesn't even consider the people of Great Britain, the workers of Great Britain.
So what are the white working classes who come from Labour families? What will they do at the next election if they feel as you do about Corbyn?
They will not be voting for Labour. They're not fit for purpose.
All right, OK, Carol, strong views there from Carol. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show. There are very few of us in this world who can avoid sport, whether we hate it or not. What's the Premier League or whatever it is, sport is everywhere. Now, I confess, I'm a big cricket fan. That's the sport that I enjoy following. But here's a cricket story that I think also turns into a bit of a Sunday morning morality tale. I don't know whether you've followed this or not, but Australia are currently playing a test series down against South Africa, and it's led to a big row over cheating. What's it all about? Well, one of the fielders, Cameron Bancroft, one of the youngest players in the side, only played about 8 test matches so far for Australia, was seen on camera producing from his pocket a piece of sticky tape, and the intention was to put granules of dirt on one side of the ball. For those that don't know anything about cricket, if one side is shiny and the other side isn't, it swings and moves through the air, making it more difficult for the batsman. But that is expressly against the rules, but the cameras caught them out. And here was Cameron Bancroft being interviewed about the incident.
I saw an opportunity to potentially use some tape, get some granules from the rough patches on the wicket, and try to, I guess, change the ball condition. It didn't work. The umpires didn't obviously change the ball, but I guess once I was sighted on the screens and having done that, I panicked quite a lot, and that obviously resulted in me shoving it down my trousers. We have this yellow tape in our kit, and it's connected to actually some padding, but the actual sticky stuff itself is it's very sticky, and I felt like it could be used to collect some stuff on the side of the pitch.
So, there's no question, there is a full admission there by that Australian cricketer, an opening batsman, that he did use that tape to try and alter the ball. Question is, why did he do it? Was he told to do it? Well, next, we had an admission of guilt from Steve Smith, their captain.
The leadership group knew about it. We spoke about it at lunch, and I'm not proud of what's happened. It's not within the spirit of the game. My integrity, the team's integrity, the leadership group's integrities come into question, and rightfully so. It's not on. It's certainly not on, and it won't happen again. I can promise you that under my leadership.
So clearly Steve Smith hopeful that under his leadership would continue. And there is precedent for this because the England captain, Mike Atherton, a couple of decades ago was caught with a bit of dirt in the pocket, using that on the ball. And that led to him being fined, but he stayed on as England captain. Well, all of this was until the Australian Premier, Malcolm Turnbull, decided to comment.
All woke up this morning shocked and bitterly disappointed by the news from South Africa. It seemed completely beyond belief that the Australian cricket team had been involved in cheating. After all, our cricketers are role models, and cricket is synonymous with fair play. How can our team be engaged in cheating like this? It beggars belief.
Well, really strong stuff there from the Aussie Premier, Malcolm Turnbull, pointing out that it's just not cricket. And I'm pleased to say that within the last hour or so, the Australian captain, incredibly talented batsman, the Australian captain, Steve Smith, has stood down as captain, as has vice-captain David Warner. And the reason I'm using this and saying that I think is a good thing is, aren't we all a bit tired of sportsmen who are paid very large sums of money, and yes, who have big pressures upon them, but consistently in all sports, cycling, athletics, whatever it is, there's a constant charge of cheating being made and nobody ever admitting to it. And in this case, they did admit to it. They've been sacked. And I hope that sends a big, strong message to young people who love sport. Actually, if you cheat, in the end, you're going to get found out. So the Labour Party, is it split? Owen Smith has been sacked. The ongoing row over this mural that Jeremy Corbyn didn't think should be removed and was clearly anti-Semitic in nature shows there are real divisions, let alone the division between the Blairites in Parliament and the Corbynites out in the country, particularly in the shape of momentum. George says, by tweet, as a dedicated long-term leaver, I would welcome a referendum on the deal because I don't trust this government. Well, George, there is an argument that if we had a referendum and rejected the deal, we would just leave on WTO terms, but I do not see Theresa May giving you that option. That's my view. David is calling from Norwich. Good morning, David.
Farage, good morning, sir. How are you?
I'm very well indeed, thank you. So, is Labour split? Now, you're a UKIPper, aren't you, David?
Do you need to know what my position is? So I'm the Home Affairs spokesman for the party now.
Right, well, that's fairly important that we do know that, yes.
So basically, can I just say this, Nigel? The bulk now of the British people realise that they've been lied and cheated to by both sides of the political system, and they are beginning to rise up against it. I mean, I went to a rally yesterday in Birmingham, and, God, it was fantastic, Nigel. The support that we got was unbelievable. People, ex-Labour members, ex-Conservative members, they've had enough. They know they've been lied to, they know they've been cheated, and they want a party to truly represent them, which is us.
David, at the top of the hour, I'm going to be talking about the Cambridge Analytica Facebook row, and, some quite strong words, being used by a former intern who worked for the Vote Leave campaign. Effectively, the Leave lobby cheated its way to victory are the headlines in some of the newspapers today. So are you accepting, when you talk about dishonesty and distrust in politics, do you think the Leave side cheated as well?
Absolutely not, Nigel. Not at all. Absolutely no way at all. We were given the massive support for the British people. You know, and I know, that as a direct result of that Brexit vote, the political establishment were, to put it mildly, flabbergasted and shocked that they'd lost. They'd no in a million years thought they were going to lose.
Yeah, and the Labour Party, David, were very, very shocked. But Corbyn has sacked Owen Smith, as you've seen, within the last couple of days. Yep. Is Corbyn now going to tell his MPs, shut up, we don't want to argue for a second referendum?
Do you know what, Nigel? I'm going to repeat to you what loads of Labour supporters said to me, or ex-Labour supporters. They just said, at the moment, the Labour Party are a bunch of nutters. That's what they said, and that's their view going forward. No, Nigel, I want our party, because we are a true British party standing up and speaking the truth. We want Brexit. We want our border controls. We want a million things looked after. And we're the only party that are going to do it. And the others don't like it, and they will try and get rid of us. You know we've been blocked by the media.
Perhaps part of UKIP's problem, David, and it's got plenty at the moment, but perhaps part of UKIP's problem is that when Theresa May gives speeches, you know, they vary, but sometimes when she speaks, she says the Conservative Party is the party of Brexit. We will take back control of our borders. I mean, that's what she says, isn't it?
Well, she might say it, but is it truth? What happened a couple of weeks ago, Nigel, that article that was in The Sun about the secret conversation went behind the scenes of the UK negotiators, civil servants for the EU, and it was recorded. You know, we're going to say we're actually doing this, but in reality we're going to do nothing. It's lies, lies, and more lies, Nigel, and the people have woken up to it, and we're not stupid.
Well, we'll have to see, David. At the moment, you know, and I've spent 25 years of my life being a member of UKIP, and I found a member. At the moment, the party is languishing. But we will see. We will see, David.
The membership is going to the roof, Nigel.
All right.
Honestly.
Okay.
To the roof.
A very bullish David from UKIP there, their new Home Affairs spokesman, thinking that UKIP can benefit from these divisions that he sees within Labour. Nigel, Labour is divided over Owen Smith's call for a second referendum. Please, as no one wants to divulge the reality of voting to stay, tell listeners the horrors of the grand European push for an empire in which the UK will be subsumed, says Jenny in Milton Keynes. Well, Jenny, they want to build a global superpower. They want to be the economic and military strongest nation on earth. I think it's all Walter Mitty, and I think the cracks are starting to show with Italian elections, etc. Nigel, the Labour Party are finished if they keep up their disruptive fence-sitting. All they do is undermine our negotiating position. Not so long ago, they would have found themselves in the Tower. Leave on WTO rules on the 29th of March, says a Brexiteer. Well, certainly, what is true is that Keir Starmer and others have been working very closely with Monsieur Barnier, and it was no particular surprise to see the Labour Party committing, post-Brexit, to us being part of a customs union, and who's to say it may be part of a single market. But on the issue of a second referendum, is Jeremy Corbyn finally putting his foot down, or will he face further rebellions from people like Owen Smith? May he even, at some point in time, have to confront Diane Abbott unless she changes her mind on having a second referendum. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show. So is the Labour Party now seriously split? And I guess it is the sacking of Owen Smith, who of course ran against Jeremy Corbyn for the leadership. He got a third of the vote, and Smith himself is an absolutely dedicated Remainer. He wants a second referendum. He thinks leaving the EU is a disaster. He told me this to my face over fish and chips in Blackpool after we'd been on Question Time just a few weeks ago. Is the party split? Well, Keir Starmer today, I think, attempting to be a bit of a peacemaker, and there's no secret that Keir Starmer, wants us signed up to a customs union, and I think ultimately some form of single market as well, but he's trying to be a peacemaker, and he's saying, we will be leaving the European Union on March the 29th next year. But the real split, I don't think the real split is in Parliament. All parliamentary parties always have splits, always have different factions. But I think the fundamental gulf split in the Labour Party is between their members of Parliament, most of whom are very Blairite, many of whom originate from London, and a membership out there, albeit a big one in London, but out there across the rest of the country, the whole momentum phenomenon very, very much to the left of where Labour are in Westminster, despite the fact they've got a left-wing leader. So, are they split? Are they in trouble? It's not just the Tories, that have problems over this. Or is this just normal party politics? So let me know. If you think Labour are split and in trouble, call me on 0345 60 60 973. And it's quite interesting that Owen Smith, in a way, is linked into both of our stories today. Lawrence says to me, and he's talking about the Cambridge Analytica Leave campaign stuff that's in the newspapers and all over the media today. He says, this is the Ramona's last throw of the dice. Why didn't this story come out sooner? As for Owen Smith, what's the hype? He didn't follow party policy, so of course he was getting the axe. Philip says, Nigel, I believe Mrs May will betray the Leave voters. This was a call we had before the break. She will keep the UK in the customs union and possibly the single market. This will be done by using the backstop agreed in the transitional agreement, saying that the whole of the UK will have to stay in to prevent a hard border in Ireland or one in the Irish Sea. So, look, what happened, folks, this week in Brussels was Northern Ireland was barely discussed. That's going to be discussed at the next big European summit meeting, and that's going to take place in June. What was discussed, of course, at this meeting, firstly, was Russia, and she was seeking a resolution out of the European Union of solidarity on Russia. She actually got more than I thought she was going to get, I have to say, particularly given the attitude of countries like Greece, Hungary and Italy, and given the fact that Angela Merkel and Jean-Claude Juncker had congratulated Putin on his re-election. So she did get more on that, but it's what happened on Friday morning. It's the agreement of the basis of terms on which we are going to negotiate a trade deal. And I think the detail of that has not yet been unpicked. It barely features in today's Sunday newspapers, and that's because there are bigger, stronger stories. There's the NHS problem, and the Tories now pledging or appearing to pledge more money. Plus there is, this whole massive debate over Cambridge Analytica, a whistleblower on the scene, and an accusation now being made, not for the first time, that the Leave campaign cheated. And that's what we're going to be discussing in a few minutes' time. But for now, I want to try and stick, if we can, on the Labour Party. We're going to Philip, a first-time caller from Croydon. He's gone. I've lost him. We're getting him back. We've lost the line. That does sometimes happen, particularly if people are on mobiles, in their cars, stuck on the side of the road, or whatever it is. Yeah, Philip, are you there?
I'm here now, yeah.
Sorry, hello there. So, Philip, how do you use it? My contention is there's a great big split between the parliamentary party, the party in the country, and it's going to lead to a big public civil war.
Well, that's absolutely right, because if you go back to even David Miliband, it goes back to the Brexit vote as well, because they refused to talk to people about their legitimate concerns about the level of migration in this country. They just ignored it, and anybody that raised it as an issue were racist or lunatics. And they're still doing it now, really.
Corbyn is quite schizophrenic on this, Philip, isn't he? Because there are a couple of interviews he's given where he said, when we leave the European Union, we won't have unlimited labour coming into the country, which might be good for British workers. And then the next week he says, I'm a world citizen. It's a bit tough to know I mean, is he again trying to keep everyone supporting him?
Sorry?
Is he just trying cynically to get everyone to support him?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think he's trying to please everybody. I think he's trying to do a Theresa May, and it's about time they really came out and said what they believe. Instead of leading us up the garden path, which is how I feel.
Are you a Labour supporter normally, Philip?
I've voted Labour all my life.
Oh, have you?
But I won't vote Labour again.
So
because you can't. I don't trust them.
So what does Corbyn need to do to persuade you, a lifelong Labour voter, to stick with him?
They need to deliver Brexit, and they need to deliver it in the fullest meaning of what we voted for.
Right.
We voted to get back control of our borders, trade, the courts, the law, just everything. We don't need unelected bureaucrats running this country.
Philip, I think I might have made that argument myself once or twice. So you want Corbyn to deliver the Brexit you voted for, yeah?
Exactly, yes.
And being part of a customs union wouldn't really tick that box.
No, because we'd be tied in to the European Union. They'd be still telling us what to do and when to do it.
Yeah.
And also, I do not believe that we'll get the Brexit. I think this latest pronouncement by by the European Union about the backstop position.
The Northern Ireland situation, yeah.
And annexing Northern Ireland. That is going to be what will keep us in. Because Theresa May, I believe, will turn around and say, well, we're going to have to stay in the customs union at least to avoid upsetting the Good Friday Agreement.
Well, that big battle, you know, we're going to see that big battle. It's going to come up at the June summit, yet another big European summit, and perhaps that's going to prove, from the British government's perspective, the toughest nut of all to crack, because right from the start, Monsieur Barnier has made the absolute most of the difficulties that we've got with Northern Ireland. Philip, thank you very much indeed for your call. And I've got time for one last caller on this, who is... from Northampton. John from Northampton, hello.
Hi, Nigel.
Hi there. So, are they badly split?
Yeah, split. Yeah, I am.
Hi there. John, are they badly split or not?
Yeah, totally split. And Keir Starmer, I mean, at the end of the day, you'd think he was the leader. The way he carries on, you know, and pushing for another referendum and stuff like that. I mean, at the end of the day, we voted to leave, and that's what we want. We want to leave the European Union.
Well, it was
a decision carried out.
It does look, John, overnight. It does look overnight, John, that maybe Starmer has come into line a little bit, not on the customs union or perhaps the single market, but on the second referendum. You know, Starmer has come down on Corbyn's side, given the sacking of Owen Smith, and he said, you know, therefore we will be leaving the European Union in March 2019. So maybe that's the Labour position. Maybe the Labour leadership, you know, wants to get us... Go on.
So, well, from what I've seen, and when I've seen Stimmer talking in the Parliament and stuff like that, it's always been basically pro-Europe. He's always supported for Europe, and he's been saying quite a lot that he wants a referendum, and you know, it makes me think whether he's just protecting his own job, which is what a lot of them do now. They're just career politicians, and they look after their own jobs, and they change their mind willy-nilly to whatever suits, you know, them at that time, you know, and they just tell us what we want to hear.
And John, are you a Labour voter normally?
Well, yeah, I am normally a Labour voter, yeah, and at the last election, I was like an inch away from voting for UKIP because I believe that they're the only party that could deliver Brexit, which is what we voted for. Me and my partner.
John, I tell you what, I'm out of time, but I think there are millions like you and our previous caller, Philip, millions of Labour voters, naturally inclined Labour voters, who want to see Corbyn deliver. Maybe that's why he's now against a second referendum. Well, look at the newspapers, see all the media today. The story is the Leave lobby cheated its way to victory. Did it? Do you think that's right? Do you believe the stories you see in the newspaper? Call me on 0345 6060 973. Text me on 84850. Tweet using the hashtag Farage on LBC at LBC. Watch us on Facebook. Comment there too. I sense we're in for a very lively hour. Well, last weekend we saw the first rumblings of a story about Cambridge Analytica and Facebook, and the story was that they'd managed to harvest about the details of about 50 million people from Facebook, and that they'd been involved with the Trump campaign and they'd been involved with the Brexit campaign. So I didn't think for one moment the story was going to stop there. And it's gone on a lot further this weekend, although not all these stories are directly linked, but we will go through them over the course of the next hour. But a Vote Leave campaigner has said the campaign was totally illegal. Now, he is a whistleblower. Shamir Sani is his name. He's 24 years old. He worked at the Vote Leave office as an intern a couple of days a week, and I think on an unpaid basis. But he did have a relationship with somebody called Ben Parkinson, who held a very senior position there and does, as a civil servant, hold a position in government today. So is this a lover's tiff that has got completely out of control, or does Shamir Sani have something to say that perhaps we should be listening to? And it's the front page of The Observer. They're the ones that have been running this stuff for a long, long time. And the accusation actually he makes is not about Cambridge Analytica as such. It actually is about a donation that Vote Leave made, and it happened in the last few days of the campaign. It was to a guy called Darren Grimes, who was leader of Believe, a website targeting young progressive voters. They made a donation to Darren Grimes. They did so almost certainly because they'd spent their legal limit of 7 million, and Grimes then spent that excess money. That of itself, not against the law. What would be against the law is if they directed how Grimes should have spent that money, and indeed, that is, the accusation that Shamir Sani is making. Dominic Cummings, their chief strategist, says nonsense. Boris Johnson even moved to tweet overnight saying the whole thing is complete nonsense. As far as Cambridge Analytica is concerned, well, the one thing that Vote Leave did do was use a Canadian data company called Aggregate IQ, and they did spend money with them, designing adverts on Facebook and elsewhere to reach as large an audience as possible. There is nothing, folks, illegal or wrong in doing this. Claims have been made that Aggregate IQ has links in some ways with Cambridge Analytica, but nobody seems to be able to actually prove that. And as I say, that of itself is not doing anything wrong. And then we get another side of this story, which is that UKIP were involved with Cambridge Analytica, and that Leave.eu and Aaron Banks were brought into all of this. And I can clear that up. UKIP did speak to Cambridge Analytica, and Cambridge Analytica put a proposal to UKIP whereby they would go through UKIP membership data to give us an accurate, up-to-date profile of who our members actually were. Indeed, we carried out a very similar operation to that just a few years previously. As it turned out, Cambridge Analytica had a look at the data, asked us to pay a bill to do the work. The bill never got paid, so I can say hand on heart that Cambridge Analytica never worked for UKIP, and they never worked for Leave.eu. They were part of the bid to get designation. Leave.eu didn't get designation, Vote Leave did. Look, folks, what's going on here is there is an establishment attempt to try to rubbish the Leave campaign, to say the Leave campaign lied, to say the Leave campaign were dodgy with money. And I'm asking you, do you think the Leave campaign cheated its way to victory? Come on and tell me what you think. I'll take any calls, any opinions. 0345 6060 973. You can text to 84850. You can tweet using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC. You can watch us on Facebook and comment there too. Elaine is calling from Watford, a first-time caller to this show. Good morning, Elaine.
Good morning, Nigel. Yeah, I was a Leave campaigner in the Watford area, and I campaigned in Wembley, Olympic Way, as well as in Harrow, mostly in Watford, supporting the street campaigns. And it's completely untrue that Leave was somehow cheating. We were underfunded. And the proper time for young Mr. Shanna to bring this up would have been when the Electoral Commission held their inquiry. It was sometime last year or even earlier. They investigated it. Now, if he knew some truth or something suspicious, he should have come forward then. That was the proper time for it. And I think also there was a parliamentary committee. I'm not sure if it was a financial audit. I've tried looking it up, but there's loads of information online. But the proper parliamentary select committee also investigated the funding of the Remain campaign and the Leave campaign. And they were investigating from the point of view that David Cameron spent 9 million leaflet in every household. It was an unfair advantage. We were only allowed to spend 7. But I'll tell you something else, Nigel. Because Leave EU wasn't selected by the Electoral Commission until sometime in March, they'd actually done the classic thing of fracture your opposition. We were, Aaron Banks' party, the different fundings, different streams, before Vote Leave was chosen as a representative. It was quite late on. And it meant that it was difficult and people were scrabbling around to get started, to just even raise the 7 million. Meanwhile, the Conservative Party, the Lib Dems, the Labour Party, although there was a Labour Leave, was funding, and they already had the foot soldiers, the door knockers who go around at general elections.
Yes, well,
they were well underway, and they were ready with their campaign materials. Even before the Vote Leave was chosen, they had printed handbills and things. They've got the funders, they've got the local distributions networks. I feel that as a Vote Leave campaigner, we were at a tremendous disadvantage.
Absolutely.
And it's amazing that we did so well. And I made great friends with lots of complete strangers. I was at the Great Debate, and it was me that shouted rubbish at Sadiq Khan that something's picked up.
So you're a heckler, Elaine.
Yeah, and I listened to Priti Patel and Michael Gove, Boris Johnson. I went to the Forum Fish Island. But mostly I gave up. I've got a job to do, 9 to 5, and I've got a working week. I gave up a lot of weekends, and so did my partner. And we spoke to people on the street, and it's ordinary people across the country that gave Leave voters the confidence that ignore Project Fear, and it's turned out to be ridiculous. The claims, and I think we've got...
All right, so you've got full faith that the Leave campaign did the right things, and that actually, and your real point, Elaine, and it's a very, very good one, and you've made it, I was going to make it, you've made it already, is that actually we were under a tremendous disadvantage.
We were. Definitely.
Yeah.
And standing in Watford, there were 4 stalls. One was Remain Conservative, one was Remain Labour, one was Remain Lib Dem, as a Lib Dem mayor was at the time, and there was just a small band of people giving up all day Saturday. We were so outgunned on the street, they already had the infrastructure in place. But just one other quick point, Nigel. It seems that there isn't enough of a spokesman. I took your point. There needs to be an umbrella organisation bringing together the different groups that exist now.
Elaine, I tried to have an umbrella group for the referendum, but the folks at Vote Leave, Tories to the last man and woman, wanted nothing to do with an umbrella group. They wanted their own campaign, chuck in one Labour MP here and there to make it look cross-party. And that was one of the problems that we had in the referendum, is that I always got the feeling that Vote Leave actually were more interested in the next Tory leader than they were the referendum itself.
Possibly. One quick point on Diane Abbott on the television, Any Questions, decided to slate the government on the blue passports being printed in France and Netherlands, wherever. Nobody in the audience, and I thought David Dimbleby should have picked it up, nobody contradicted. The reason why is because of the 50,000 cost means that you've got to go out to, it's EU rules that you've got to go out to tender. Nobody pulled up on that. There seems to be no one
Elaine, I mentioned this on Sky News. You'd have thought I'd sort of uttered a swear word. But yeah, EU tendering rules. Elaine, thank you very much indeed. And Elaine is right. She's absolutely right. Both sides, in theory, could spend 7 million during the referendum. But the political parties could also spend money, and more of those, of course, backed Remain than backed Leave. And blow me down if on top of all of it, David Cameron did not spend £9 million of taxpayers' money sending every household a booklet telling us why Remain was the right option. How I enjoyed going up 10 Downing Street and posting it back through his letterbox. So the idea that somehow the Leave campaign hid spending and did all sorts of odd things is nonsense. We've been outgunned, and the Remain side, have spent money for 50 years. The European Union spends over €2 billion every year on promotion of its institutions and its identity. Shanjan is calling from Bradford. Good morning.
Good morning, Nigel.
So,
I believe what is happening is we've seen a globalist establishment attempt, 1, to bring down the government, 2, to spread fear stories, and then number 3, also to damage the UK's reputation on the world stage. Because if you look at what's happened now with the Russia affair in Salisbury, if you look at what's happening with this Cambridge Analytica story, and now this Vote Leave whistleblower, it's all part of an attempt to overturn the result.
Yes, it is. That is absolutely my view. Yes.
But here's the rub. Why don't we think about why did people vote to leave in the first place? Why did people do this? I don't think Cambridge Analytica told people, and I know you were involved with overseas with the Trump campaign. I don't think anybody in West Yorkshire or West Virginia who worked in, let's say, coal mining were told by Vladimir Putin Cambridge Analytica to let me just say this, to go and vote to leave the EU and put Donald Trump into the White House. I think people have their own brains, and here's the rub: you can't replace mining with McDonald's.
No,
that's what you can't do that.
No,
and expect people to be happy.
The idea that some sort of mind-bending formula was discovered to make us all go crackers and vote Brexit and Trump is ludicrous.
I don't believe it, and I think what we see is that when we watch the news and the media, there is so much anger, resentment. That is all the time. It feels you're on social media all the time. You get abused, but when you go out into the street, like when I'm speaking from Bradford, if you go into some parts of the city, there will be somebody who voted Remain. Because maybe, a woman in her 40s, because she's very well off, she works at a block of offices in Leeds, has a BMW X5, and she was likely to vote Remain. Whereas somebody on a council estate, at the age of 45, stacking shelves at Sainsbury, was more likely to vote to leave because they felt worse off. So how do politicians resolve that problem? Instead of going back and forth on this referendum, why not just close it down, accept it, and think forward and think, how do we make sure
Shanjan, we need vision. We need vision. We need leadership. But today's story is that an unpaid intern, a whistleblower, is saying that the Leave lobby cheated and that the whole thing, frankly, was illegal. Do you think the Leave campaign cheated its way to victory? If you do, come and tell me that on 0345 60 60 973. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show exclusively on LBC. Well, strong claims this morning that the Leave campaign may well have broken the law, may well have been an illegal referendum, may well be that the Leave lobby cheated its way to victory. And this is not just about Cambridge Analytica, it is also about a payment that Vote Leave made to a student based in Brighton. We can't go into too much detail, it gets complicated, but do you think that the Leave lobby cheated its way to victory? But before we get there, another story that I think is really, really interesting. Only the Sun on Sunday has got this story, exclusive by David Wooding, and it says Donald Trump is lining up a surprise summer visit as a Brexit troubleshooter. So Trump is coming to Ireland. He's due to be there as early as June. He'll visit Dublin first, and then he's seriously considering an offer to go and visit Northern Ireland, whether that's Belfast or elsewhere, I don't know, afterwards. And pretty clear to me, and by the way, I think this story is true, that he is considering doing this, and pretty clear to me that that would be a very good thing indeed. Why? Well, interestingly, Trump has got contacts on both sides of this divide. You can find photographs of Trump and Jerry Adams. They go back a few years, but Jerry Adams speaking at dinners in New York, Trump in attendance, and has said publicly that he knew him. And obviously Trump knows one or two Brexiteers as well. He knows one sitting in this chair this morning. So Trump does, he does have knowledge of both sides of this campaign. Maybe if anybody can find a solution to the Irish border, maybe it's Donald Trump. Hey, he's managed to get the North Koreans to agree to sit down and have a meeting. So I see this as a very positive piece of news, and I really hope he does come to both the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland in June of this year. Now, my next caller on the subject of did the Leave campaign cheat their way to victory? Helen is calling from Weston-super-Mare. Good morning.
Hello, Nigel.
Hi.
Hi. No, absolutely not. It's just the most massive case of sour grapes. The establishment just can't get over the audacity of us plebs voting against their instructions, I'm afraid. The Remain campaign had, the majority of everybody supporting the Conservative Party, the shadow cabinet, practically all the MPs, all foreign leaders.
Barack Obama, Goldman Sachs.
The big banks, the big business. They had their extra leaflet at $9.5 million. They had an extra 48 hours tacked on for registration, if you remember, because the website went down for 2 hours.
I do.
They even, and I know this is a bit sensitive, but they kind of used the death of an MP in the campaign, and that's before you even start talking about Project Fiat.
Some would argue it the other way on that, Helen. But
I know.
But Helen, if it okay, let's try and be devil's advocate. I mean, the only accusation really that I can see that this so-called whistleblower is making is he's saying that £625,000 was given to a student based in Brighton running a website called Believe, and what he's saying is, whilst making a donation like that to a separate campaigning group would not have been illegal from Vote Leave, what would have been illegal is to direct how the money is being spent. So let's say, for argument's sake, there was something in that claim. Would that give the Leave vote a problem?
No. I mean, the playing field was so totally tipped in their favour. And wasn't it only a few weeks ago that the Lib Dems had a similar thing where their spending was found to be much more because they had actually failed to include certain people in their spending returns?
Yes, and, frankly, Helen, if we're being frank about it, there has been gross overspending in all sorts of by-election campaigns over the course of the last few years. Some would say even overspending in one or two general election seats, but for legal reasons I can't go any further than that this morning. But yeah, I mean, actually, if Vote Leave had spent their $7 million and had an excess nearly $750,000 and decided to give it somewhere else, you could argue they were scrupulously trying to stay within the law.
Well, exactly, and I distinctly remember them actually running out of money a couple of weeks before the actual referendum and scratching around, and other parties having to come and help them out because they had no money left. They didn't even have enough money for any more boards.
Yeah. So, Helen, you're not concerned at all?
Not at all, no.
Not one little bit. Helen from Weston-super-Mare, supremely relaxed there on the Bristol Channel this Sunday morning. Russell says it's pathetic. So the Leave camp cheated, and that's obviously why they won the referendum. Typical Ramonas, fundamentally refusing to accept the result, just like in the US, where the Democrats fundamentally refused to accept that Trump won. They try every trick in the book to reverse the result. Well, certainly, the journalist at the heart of this, at the Guardian Observer, Observer, is Carol Cadwalla. And she does seem to be pretty obsessive about this. She said on the Andrew Marr show this morning that the money that was spent on social media through Aggregate IQ, a firm in Canada, this money spent by the Vote Leave campaign, she said they spent 98% of their money on this. Well, maybe you're good, Carol, as a journalist at finding out who meets who and who talks to who, but they did not spend 98% of their money on this. They might have spent 35% of their money on this, maybe 38% of their money on this. But to go on television and say they spent 98% of shows, actually, you haven't dug as deep as you like to give the impression. This, by the way, the same Carol Cadwalla that says that I am at the centre of an international global conspiracy. It is me who links Putin, Trump and Assange, and that was wrong too. Rudy is calling from Exeter. Good morning, Rudy.
Hi, Nigel. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. So are you concerned about Cambridge Analytica and what's gone on here?
No, and the thing is this, Nigel, right? What these people do not get, these Ramonas do not get, it wouldn't matter what you spent, what the statistics would be, we all would have voted anyway. We already had it in our mind years ago to do it. And what they say and what they do will make no difference. Even now, I will never vote to stay in the European Union if I had a referendum again.
Right.
And they just don't get it. They just don't get that it makes no difference to people like us. We want to get out of the European Union. We voted to get out, and we would have voted regardless of how much money would have been spent on the Leave campaign. We made our mind up years ago.
But they're trying, Rudy. I mean, there is an establishment attempt. And by the way, if wrongdoing is found, it's found. I'm not sure they're going to find any, but let's see. But I'm sure both sides should be forensically investigated, not just one side. But Rudy, they keep saying that we lied through it all, and now they're saying we cheated through it all. I mean, do you think they'll give up at some point?
Well, they may not give up, but the point is it will make no difference to the people that voted Leave, and they don't get it. They can shout through the hills if they want. It's not going to change the people's vote. And the more and more we see the way May is attempting to stitch us up and the way the European Union are doing it, it's just going to cause more and more people to decide to vote Leave because I say we don't want this.
What? That's if they forced us to vote again. Well, really, I tell you what is interesting. Despite acres and acres of media print on this and radio and television coverage, and it's been going on for month after month after month, the Leave side lied. I mean, goodness me, they told my parents they were joining a common market and not to worry their little head. But they keep on with this, and yet it is not changing the public's appetite for a second referendum one little bit. It is only 20% out there that think we should have a second referendum on the final deal.
But the thing is this, Nigel, what they don't realise is this, right? The people that are living it every day in these towns and cities that are affected by it, they're living and breathing it every day. So they don't care what they see in the newspaper or what people tell them, because they go by what they see and not what people say and what they experience. Like, I have to wait 3-4 weeks for a doctor's appointment.
Yeah.
You know, all these kinds of... This is what they don't get.
No, they're the real issues. They are,
yeah.
Rudy, and they haven't got better. In fact, arguably, they've got worse since we voted to leave. Rudy,
and just one more thing, just one
go
more
on, quickly.
Thing, before you go, right, quickly. Right, with regards to the Northern Ireland border, there is one solution, and that is Southern Ireland can join us to leave. Then there's no problem.
Well, wouldn't that be wonderful? I couldn't agree more. Thank you, Rudy. I was in Dublin a few weeks ago saying that at a Saturday afternoon rally, much to the horror of the establishment. Dave says to me by text, perhaps on referendum morning, it was you, Nigel, that sneaked around the country and put something on people's cornflakes, because kind of that's what they're attributing Cambridge Analytica as having done. They did not. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show, exclusive in LBC. Now, my guess is very few people understand this Cambridge Analytica story, other than the fact they use Facebook to get people's data. And that's kind of opened up, I think, in terms of Facebook itself and many forms of social media, some pretty big questions in people's minds about when they go online to do things, to what extent are they actually being tracked, and is their information being sold on or given to other organisations? It's really interesting that Cambridge Analytica was said to have got the details of 50 million people, the vast majority of whom, by the way, were in North America. What was really interesting was it turned out that the Obama campaign 4 years before had used Facebook to garner the details of 200 million people. But Obama's a nice guy, so it's okay. Trump's horrible, so it's bad. I mean, that's the kind of hypocrisy that is going around this. Been a very bad week for Facebook. Their share price has fallen very significantly, and polls showing about 2/3 of Facebook users concerned about some of the potential level of intrusion into their lives by using that medium. But hey, I think it really goes for virtually all forms of social media. So I understand the complexity of this, but I'm interested. I'm really interested. Is this story, which makes the front page in The Observer, and is of course mentioned elsewhere, is the basic story an accusation from people who backed the Remain campaign and still do? The accusation that the Leave campaign cheated and lied. Is this a story that actually gets out there into the country and makes people who voted Remain angry? Because at the moment, I've not had one of you call me to say to me, of course the Leave campaign cheated its way to victory. Now, normally on this show, I have no difficulty over issues of Brexit in getting people to come on and say, Nigel, you're wrong, because. Sometimes in a polite way, not always, obviously, but generally in a polite way. And at the moment, I'm not getting anybody coming on backing up the Carol Cadwella Observer story. And if I don't get anybody in this next 20 minutes, I'm going to conclude that stories like this are London media bubble stories that do not have any resonance in the wider country at all. James is calling me from Manchester. Good morning, James.
Hello, Nigel. Thanks for taking my call. Quickly, the biggest crock that I've seen in quite a while going on here. Your callers, and I think Sanjeev was one of them in particular, they said nearly everything I was going to say. I'm 51, Nigel. I have never in my life had Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, absolutely nothing. And not only did I vote Leave, but I also campaigned for 3 months in my part-time, spare time, 3 months door knocking, etc., etc., etc. And when one of your callers said that we were at a bitter disadvantage, we seriously were at a very disadvantage. The idea, this is just yet again, and I believe this has been put out from the establishment, yet again another smokescreen, right, to try and force a second referendum on the country, right? It's all a load of rubbish, and to think, to insult people, insult the intelligence of people that some formula somehow or other made them vote. Your previous caller was talking, Nigel, about doctors and waiting times. This hit the nail on the head. The establishment don't realise what's going on the ground, and that brings me to my last point, Nigel. You know, I was reading time and time again, you know, on the news, on the media, on the internet, you know, these marches, anti-Brexit marches, this, that and the other. And for all the people who are listening, and all the people who are listening in the establishment, they have got no idea, Nigel, no idea of the amount of anger that is bubbling under up here in the north with this Brexit negotiations, etc. Right? They call Putin that he's a dictatorship, and because he won by 75%, it was all rigged. Right? No, Nigel, we live in a dictatorship. We voted to get out in June 2016. We're now having to wait 5 years, if at all, before we get out. The dictatorship is here. It's not in Russia and all these other places. And the anger, Nigel, is like a boiling kettle. It's going to boil over, and the kettle itself is going to explode. Wow. They've got no idea what is going on at foot level, right? And any more attempts of this nonsense, and the whole thing is going to blow up, and they're going to see something that they've never seen. They had 3,000 people, which really means 300, on the streets of wherever yesterday saying we want to stay with the EU. Stay with the EU then, yeah? You have your army, and tell all your children, by the way, that Juncker's next line of attack is full-on conscription for all your children, like they still do.
Well, he wants a European army, James. I'm not sure he wants full conscription, but you never know. James, you've got huge passion. I can tell you're very upset and angry. Thank you for your call. And James saying, you know, no one said to him, no one tried to mesmerise him, no one tried to poison his mind on the internet. He made up his own mind. On Twitter, I get, for all their bluster about the supremacy of our nation's laws, Brexit fans are only concerned about denying that Cambridge Analytica affected the EU referendum result. Apparently the possibility that our democracy and legal system were undermined is meaningless to them. It's meaningless, matey, because you've been trying this in America for the last 8 months. You're now trying it here, and nobody actually believes it. If there was real cheating, well, it went on from the establishment, and it happened with our Prime Minister blatantly for spending 9 million quid of our money to send a leaflet through every single door in the land. We have been massively outspent. The Remain side, massively outspent the Leave side. They've been doing it for 50 years in constant self-promotion. Peter says by text, don't understand, Nigel. If Leave spent more than it should, and Remain spent more than Leave, when is this journalist going to call for an investigation into Remain? Very interesting. Cara Cadwell, as I said, on the Marsh show this morning, she was directly challenged on that point by Isabel Oakeshott, who said, come on, you know, if you're looking at, if this is not politically motivated, why not look at the Remain campaign? And of course, she fiercely refused to do so. Sylvia is calling me from Putney. Good morning, Sylvia.
Yes, hello, Nigel. We've got another 3 years of this while we're still in this, 3 years after we're supposed to have left. And I don't care what they've spent. I don't care whether it's 10 million or 10 pence. My vote would have been the same. My vote comes from my experience of life pre and after being in the EU, and that's what governed my vote. I'm old enough to have been around before we signed up in 75, and I voted no then. And I don't use the Facebook, so I'm not going to be influenced by any of this stuff. I just rely on my own experience of life, and I think these spending rules should be scrapped. I don't care what they spend. If they want to spend 10 million, 20 million, so be it. And if the others haven't got so much money, it doesn't make any difference, Nigel. They don't have to spend the same. It doesn't influence people.
No, actually, Sylvia, I mean, one thing I've seen is that money is not everything in elections. Having the right message and resonating with people, that's what really counts. And, you know, don't forget, you know, I mean, I've fought general elections, I've fought European elections against the establishment mainstream, never been able to compete in terms of money, but there were times when, in terms of message, I could compete with them on a very even basis. Sylvia, how do you feel when some people say that we've sold out our children's future? How do you respond to that?
Yes, I do think so, because I've lived pre-EU, you see. I'm old enough. I'm one of the old codgers that didn't know what they were doing. And, life was much better before we went in. We seemed to be freer. I mean, us youngsters in the 60s, I think we travelled much more than the youngsters do now. We just went when we liked, for as long as we liked, to the continent. So, we found ourselves jobs.
Yeah.
And it was so easy. Now they're talking about having visas and not being allowed to stay. And I find it so weird. And you see, the youngsters now have been influenced by their left-wing teachers are telling them they won't be able to travel abroad and all the rest of it.
It's extraordinary, isn't it?
I know.
Sylvia, I think that point you've made about in the 60s, people heading off to Europe and getting jobs and doing... You didn't need a European Union to do any of that. It's a beautifully made point, and I thank you very much indeed for that. Thank you, Sylvia, for your call. Yep, but that's how it's been presented to much of the nation's youth. I think it's wrong, but now on top of that, they're being told that the Leave side cheated and lied their way to victory, and very few of you are coming on 03456060973 to tell me that I was part of that great conspiracy. You can do so if you want. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show exclusively on LBC. Did we, on the Leave side, lie and cheat our way to victory, as is being suggested by a whistleblower, albeit only an intern, in the Vote Leave campaign? Well, I wonder what Russell in Tower Hamlets makes of that. Good morning, Russell.
Hi. Yeah, I'd like to say that you were wrong in saying that they weren't affecting the vote. Let me start by stating the fact that all the advertising, all the TV adverts and the public debate and everything, they're all designed to influence not the people who have already decided, but to influence the people who haven't decided.
Yes.
So we were all after the people who are undecided. So if I give you an example, that I know of someone who's very close to me who voted for Leave because of an advert on a bus that claimed about something about the NHS.
Yeah.
Now, she voted to Leave on the back of that, and only on the back of that. So
Russell, when you,
an influence.
Russell, a moment ago you used the word "we." So were you part of the Remain campaign?
Yes, I'm part of the Remain campaign.
Okay, fine.
So there's nothing. There was no advert that's going to switch my bias on that, and I was going to vote for Remain regardless. But those adverts are not going to affect me. The extra spending or the whatever spending has gone on wouldn't have affected my vote, but it would have affected the vote of the people who were undecided.
Okay.
So there's no point of people who were decided to vote to call in and say that, hey, that advert or that much spending or that little spending or whatever, that cheating or whatever is not going to affect me. Well, yes, it isn't going to affect you. It's going to affect the people who are undecided.
Well, Russell, I put it to you, as somebody who was part of the Remain campaign, I put it to you that when David Cameron spent £9 million sending a booklet to every house in the country warning us about the dangers of Brexit, that actually that was massive overspending and an abuse of his position.
Fine. I'll accept that, and then I'll also say that bring the court case on.
Right.
So, as I would say, with every single mechanism that anyone has used to defraud the voter should be challenged, just as much as this should be challenged.
But we can finish up, Russell.
Every single advert that has gone and that has been used to go against it, that's been a lie, should be challenged too.
Okay, Russell, do you not worry that if everything, I mean, clearly we have to have laws and rules and guidelines as to how campaigns are fought. But do you not worry that we could finish up in years and years of people questioning how both campaigns behaved?
Not at all. The risk of losing our rights to our rights to vote properly, and to lose our democracy, the cost of that is way more than any cost that we would spend in order to fix it.
Yeah, I'm not worried about that. I was worried about the time. I also do question.
Yeah, it's including time. If it takes 10 years to fight this case and to put the people who are accountable, to whatever punishment that's due, I think that's the money well spent or time well spent. But we shouldn't ignore it. We shouldn't just say, these guys might have overspent, so we're not going to pursue it because it's going to take us 10 years.
And do you not think
that's rubbish?
Do you not think the timing of this so-called whistleblower is a bit odd? I mean, every opportunity was there last year when the Electoral Commission were looking into both sides in the referendum. Isn't the timing of this a little bit strange?
I don't think it is strange at all. I think the timing was because Cambridge Analytica, somebody whistleblowed on them against the Trump campaign, and as on the side of that, some other whistleblower came out.
All right.
There's no. I don't think there's a conspiracy theory there, as much as you try to prove that.
Well, I'm asking a question, Russell. I want to ask you absolutely straight. Do you think that the Leave campaign did spend money badly?
I've got no idea.
No. Fine. Russell, I thank you for your call. And a bit of breaking news is that the former Catalan president, Carles Puigdemont, has been detained in Germany. The politician who's been self-imposed exile following the Catalan independence referendum last year. I don't quite know what's going on here, but he was intercepted by German police at the Danish border. More of that on LBC as that story develops. One thing for certain is that the Spanish government in Madrid are not softening one little bit towards the Catalan separatists. Dawn is calling from Rayleigh. Hello, Dawn.
Good morning, Nigel. I wanted to phone you to tell you I believe they did cheat.
OK, good. Tell me why.
It's same as the previous one. Form. Big fat lie on big red bus of big fat Boris Johnson standing in front.
Now, what was the lie?
It was about if we leave the EU, we can have all this money and we will give it to the NHS. The actual amount was debunked fairly swiftly, and the idea, we're going to give it. No, they're not. They're never going to give all that money to the NHS. They knew they were misrepresenting that.
It was an odd choice of number, even though the gross figure technically was correct. Yeah. And I mean, even though it was correct, but I'd much rather they'd used a figure that was lower than that. A couple of 100 million a week would have been fine.
Use the proper figure and thought maybe we could give some of this to the NHS, but that's not going to look quite so good on a big red bus with big fat boys.
Well, if they'd said 200 million a week we could give to the NHS, it would have been unarguable, and it still is a figure that would have stunned people. Whether the figure was 200 or 350 made no difference, but I agree with you, it wasn't a very clever thing to do. But
it's showing them up as a liar, basically. Just coming quickly to you, Nigel.
Yeah.
I absolve you.
Oh my goodness me!
Yeah.
Is that because it's Sunday morning and we're all being nice to each other?
Well, I'm in a nice mood, and also I saw an interesting television program called NCIS. I recommend you watch it. It's very nice eye candy. But one of the characters in it, Tony DiNozzo, has problems with his father because he's a police officer and he believes his father's a con man.
Yeah.
There's a problem here.
Right.
And he's a bit of a Donald Trump character, this father. He's been bankrupt several times and so on and so forth, and he's always got entrepreneurial ideas. And when his father realises that his son has got his opinion of him in the back of his mind, he says, listen, son, there's a difference between being a dreamer and being a con man. I believe what I tell people. I have a vision and I believe it's true. A con man knows he's lying.
Ah.
And that's the difference between you, Nigel, and some other people.
Right, so I'm not a con man. I'm just a bit misguided.
A dreamer.
Yeah? I'm a dreamer. Oh, Dawn, you know, after all the horrid things people have been saying about me for the last couple of years, for you to come on with a different point of view on a Sunday morning and to say that I'm a dreamer, I'm going to take that as a great compliment, even if you...
I still think you're wrong.
No, fine. Well, but that's the joy of democracy, and that's why LBC and Talk Radio is so wonderful. It's the ultimate form of democracy. Dawn, you're an absolute star. Do you think... You know, I mean, clearly the Cambridge Analytica story is desperately complicated. But do you think these accusations about money and spending by the Leave campaign are really relevant, given the £9 million David Cameron spent putting a booklet through our front doors?
Well, I didn't even read mine. I went to other more reliable sources when it came down to making my decision.
What, the Prime Minister?
Well, yeah, I mean, David Attenborough and Stephen Hawking, for starters.
Right.
You know.
Dawn, thank you ever so much. Have a great Sunday. And Dawn didn't even read that piece of literature put through our doors by David Cameron. I did. It made me very angry. It made me realise, actually, the Remain side have been cheating for over 50 years. They've spent hundreds of millions advertising themselves, and whatever the Leave campaign have done, if there is a minor infraction, there is one. But one thing for certain, there is not a major one. Well, you've been listening to the Nigel Farage Show exclusively on LBC.